One of the most important tools we have in our toolkit is to look back at our projects as objectively as possible, to see what we like and what we don't like. If we look over enough, we might identify some common areas of weakness that we can focus our growth efforts on. So let's do this with the 2024 showreel and have a little bit of a retrospective on them. The Corsair was the first model I did this year. I pushed myself a lot here to learn how to blend really well. The model as a whole, I think I did a good job on. It's smooth with somewhat consistent lighting. Then the base. Wow. The less we say about this, the better. It doesn't look like a rock. It doesn't look interesting. Nothing to capture the eye. But it gives us a nice starting point for the year. This also won me a notable entry at Golden Demon, so I can't be too upset with it. After the Corsair, I wanted to explore basing a bit, so I did this, called Snowfall, using some tiny astronauts to try and create a scene. I wanted to push the storytelling elements here a bit, and while rather on the nose, it's clear the story here. The guy's just fallen down, and his buddy's looking down on him. I really like the colour palette used here, orange contrasting over white and blue, but the snow doesn't really feel natural, and again there's nothing really to guide you around the piece. This pirate model, my friend Brush Friendly Studios gave to me. Again, I wanted to push my basing a bit more after the Corsair. The elements, however, didn't really tie together very well. Painting wise, I remember having a blast with this as I was trying to imitate the Craft World style of painting before doing the Deathwing Terminator video. It ended up being nowhere near what I wanted, and actually quite far from the style. But I kind of like how it turned out, and I do look back fondly on this piece. For the Inquisitor, this was a model I've had for a long time. I really wanted to try and nail the non-metallic metal on this, and I think in some areas it worked really well. The sword on the front, for example, the reflections in specular are completely correct in my eyes. But I remember losing interest as I was going through this, especially when I got to the gold, so that just feels flat and boring to me. I wanted a very simple base for this, so I just painted a floor texture on and had him stand on it. I tried to add some reflections onto the surface, but it didn't really end up very well, and the lack of OSL is really jarring on this model. I really should have come in and done that. Now we move on to the Steel Rook. This model, I took what I learned from the Corsair and the more complex bases so far and pushed myself even more. The base feels natural, but it falls apart compositionally. There needs to be some areas of focus as it all blends together. I think just a simple bird or something in the bottom right would have helped. The Steel Rook model itself, I'm really happy with how he's painted, but for some reason I ended up putting purple in the shadows. I can't really remember why. The feathers also kind of rushed. This was something, however, that I do look back on happily. It won me a commended entry card at Salute, so I'm happy with it. From a Steel Rook, we move on to the Waste Stalker. This is a bucket list mini for me. I managed to find one for 15 quid, and I couldn't say no to that. It had a lot of super glue on it to tidy up, and working with metal minis was hard. The old sculpts are really not as fun, I find. I wanted to focus here on the skin, as so much of it is exposed. I think it came out really good. It feels warm, but maybe I should have pushed it a little bit more, something I have done since then. The base for her is a bit mismatched. She's kind of just standing there, nothing really pulling you back into the model. I remember when I created this I wanted to feel like the tops of trees and all that, but executionally I just couldn't do it. The Cities of Sigmar squad leader is next. This one I actually did a full video on, something I think was really representative of where I was at the time. The NMM was nailed in this style. The rest of the model I was trying to do in sort of grimdark without using oils, imitating the style of my friend Lufarian99. I think it came out great. The base kind of bridges the gap between where I was to where I ended up towards the end of the year. There isn't much focus there again, however, so again it kind of just blends in and the values feel a bit off. This is starting to become a recurring theme. The Emperor's Champion was a quick model I did for Rome Lepart's 32mm scale bust challenge. This was more of an experiment with the brush strokes and how to pull focus towards the face, and it came out so much better than I intended. However, compositionally the sword should have been shorter to make it feel more tight. It's very tall at the moment. This was, however, something so far out of my comfort zone. We then have a couple of busts. Not really my favourite thing to paint, but it's important to break out a bit, especially as it gives us the ability to practice texturing. The orc here is currently being used as box art, but I think this is more because I was the first person to paint and post it. It was a nice experiment with texturing and keeping things interesting, really learning how to do rust. I was really trying here to imitate the style of Orc Butts painting, and I'm not really sure how close I came. But seriously, that guy's a goldmine of information and well worth subscribing to. The elf here, I don't really have much to say on. The face, skin and colours feel off, the texture work on the cloak is fantastic, but the shield freehand doesn't feel natural. Busts are especially hard when there's no examples of how it's been painting before. This was a surprising discovery, as it turns out I'm not that confident when I don't have something I can follow and see what each element is. My absolute favourite thing, and also the most disappointing thing I've painted this year, were these 3 night goblins, ones from Battle from Skull Pass box. I got some feedback on this from BB Miniatures to increase the lights and shadows, and it really came together. However, it didn't do well at Golden Demon, which was really heartbreaking for me. But looking back on it, I still really like it. It pushed me a lot to learn. The composition was something I focused on from the start. However, I feel like it works better in a right to left cultures instead of left to right cultures. The rocks, this was sculpted after the Corsair, but before some of the other things and other experiments with rocks. And it really shows it as it kind of bridges the gap between them. There are definitely steps in the right direction here, but it's just not quite there yet. It did, however, win me a pin at the Fen model show, so that was a nice little bonus. This was my entry for Infinity's painting competition, and I loved this one. I did a full video on it from start to finish, and I feel like this pushed me more than anything I've painted this year to this point. The base is complex, natural and overgrown. The model is interacting with the base. The model, for the most part, is brighter than the base. All of this ticks most of the boxes for me. But again, something about it doesn't feel right, and I think for this it comes down to the pose. There isn't really much of it to go on, and finding the golden angle for this piece is pretty hard. It also taught me that I could put a lot of time and effort into a video and it not perform particularly well. But that could also be because it's not a great video. After Cassandra, I ended up taking a bit of a break for Golden Demon and kind of dealing with my feelings post-Demon. I did a couple of small projects just to experiment, but nothing I'm going to say I'm super proud of. They were both fun little things done in an afternoon. I read The Art of Chris Cherie cover to cover during this time as well, and used it as inspiration for my next piece, Nighttime Raid. This was the most ambitious sculpting thing I made this year. I wanted to nail the rocks, so I had to look around. And I tried to sculpt what I saw and maybe cartoonify it a bit. These rocks, compared to where I was at the beginning of the year, night and day difference. Chris's book focuses a lot on composition, and this piece here feels to me compositionally correct. Everything follows this diagonal line of action from the top left to the bottom right. However, it then falls apart when I start to paint it, and the values are just too high in places. There's nothing to pull you to a goblin at the top. It's something that I really like, but something I find really hard to look at now. I feel like this year is highlighting a lack of understanding of the fundamentals of art, the skills that happen before we even pick up the paintbrush. I feel like this year is highlighting a lack of the understanding of the fundamentals of art, the skills that happen before we even pick up the paintbrush, how to use colour, how to use value, what things actually look like, and how to draw the eye. Technically, I can blend 2 colours. It's not my favourite thing to do, but the fundamentals do not really care about these specific techniques we use, so I plan to explore these fundamentals a lot more next year. And hopefully you'll come along for a ride, and we'll be able to sit down and discover these fundamentals and practice them together.